Good morning, traders and investors. Steve Gans here with the weekend update on February 17th. Now, I normally would have done this on Sunday, but I was traveling back from a trip here, today being a market holiday. I just went ahead, did the weekend update here today. Again, February 17th, 2025. Let's take a look at the SPX. And one of the things that you'll notice is that we are right at this line of prior highs. So coming right into what has previously been resistance here and somewhat there. So a pretty steady line of resistance. Now, does that mean we're not going to break through? Of course it does not. What seems to be happening here is each time we're coming into that, we were for a few weeks here making lower lows and lower highs. We broke that trend right here. Then we went back to it a little bit, but each one of these, we're still in an uptrending pattern. Each one of these, now we're starting to get higher lows. We haven't yet made higher highs. We're coming back to right at that 50% dashed line in this channel, and that, combined with this, is acting as a little bit of resistance. Now, resistance works and support works when lots of people see it and recognize it. Most people will see this in daily bars. Most of your people that are looking at the markets tend to be looking at daily bars. This is probably one of the most visible patterns out there. And again, I do think it will provide some level of resistance. Does that mean we're going to back off that significantly? I don't think so. My expectation is one of two things, either a little bit of a pullback, maybe a chop sideways here for a few days. Not sure why my pen just went off here, but so a little bit of a chop sideways there for a few days. And ultimately, I think we're going to move higher. We could even come all the way back down to the bottom of this channel and then potentially move higher, short of any significant news. Right now, the market seems to be shaking off pretty much any news out there and just showing its strength, showing that it's wanting to go higher. We're also seeing that volume here is starting to grow a little bit again on these up days. That also tends to be a little bit more bullish sign. So I do think we are probably poised for some type of a breakout in the not too distant future. But I do see maybe a little bit of pullback to that trend line happening in the meantime. Now let's just look at the VIX, the volatility index, which tells us, is there fear in the market? Are there people that are buying puts at any significant level? The answer to that is a big fat no. Volatility is as low as it's been in recent weeks here. Not quite as low as it was here, but it's pretty darn close. So volatility is low. People aren't really buying insurance right now at this time, which means that people just aren't really perceiving any significant fear out there in the marketplace. Let's look at the other main index that I look at, which is the Russell 2000. Now, the Russell, as I had mentioned last week, has in the past blown out the bottom of this channel that I had drawn. Maybe my channel actually needs to be drawn a little bit lower is another case for this, but regardless, it does seem to be following in line with that historical pattern of coming down to the bottom of the channel that I had drawn and then maybe dropping out of that a little bit further and then rebounding back into it. But somewhat the same thing with the Russell here. There is a resistance line here. Actually, I could probably draw that a little higher. And that resistance line right now is holding this. While it is also a little bit bullish, it's forming a wedge pattern, much like the S&P is. It doesn't appear to be quite as strong at this point, but it is still holding up well also. So the Russell's holding well. My expectations here are going to be more of a sideways chop, maybe a little bit of a pullback to the bottom of this channel and then move back up. Probably ultimately within the next couple of weeks, a breakout to highs again as well. I say highs, not necessarily above these recent highs is a better way of saying it. I don't know that we're going to be breaking those highs anytime soon in the Russell. That's my expectations on the Russell. Let's look at the Russell Volatility Index, the RVX, to see if there's anything there that shows anything different to us. And if we look at Russell volatility, that answer is nope, no real fear there either. And it's at pretty much recent lows of the past, almost year. We were a little bit lower back in here, but not much. The Russell Volatility Index is pretty much at an all-time low as well, also signaling no real fear in the market, more of a bullish stance to the market. That's where we're at as far as taking a broad look at the indexes here, again, on February 17th. If you find this information helpful, please subscribe. Give me any comments down below as well. I make sure that I take a look at all of those. Now, for those of you that are part of the alert service, let's take a look at current positions in the alert service and see where we're at on those. These are the current positions. This first one here is a butterfly position. This position had been more of a broken wing fly, which I converted into this flat fly. And this flat fly has at least a win of around $500 and some odd. That's the worst case scenario now on this fly. But what I did do is I left this fly intact to see if there might be any chance of coming close to pegging this point, which I believe is 61. I can't quite read it up there. Whatever the center of that is, if this were to peg later this week, this could be a much, much larger gain than $500. And I have no real risk in, hi, Trader Cat. I have no real risk in checking that out. Hey, come on. So we got work to do here. So anyhow, I plan on leaving that in place and just seeing if there's any chance of me being able to get more out of this come Thursday or so. So again, I've got no downside in doing. Now, this next broken wing butterfly, would you like to just take care of this for me? No? Okay. Somebody got a little lonely while we were gone. So anyhow, on the next butterfly here, this call spread out here may be something I'm going to need to do something with if the market does continue higher. Again, I'm expecting a stall, maybe even a little bit of a back off. If that's the case, this T0 line is going to continue to mound up there, continue to bring profit into that trade as well. And I might look at thinning that out a little bit later on this week. Now, this earnings trade here, I'm going to take a look at that. I don't know what I'm going to do with that. Again, people keep asking for earnings trades, but I'm telling you from my experience, earnings trades are difficult. You either make it or break it pretty quickly. In this case, I did have a chance to thin this. Pru did get up into this area where I would have only been down around $250 in that trade. I did leave it set there. There's only 4 days left. I may look at rolling this trade out to a point in the future, but that's what happens sometimes with earnings trades is I end up battling those for months. In many cases, I can get them back to profitability, but it's also a pretty taxing process to go through that for, in some cases, it could be right up until the next earning trades, which is 3 months away in some cases. Bit of a challenge. I'm not quite sure where I'll end up going with this one. I'd like to see a little bit of a rebound in this, and then maybe I'll end up pulling the plug on it. SQ also, it started life as SQ, and then it got moved to XYZ as far as its symbol. And while it had started off really strong, it's just pulled back. In fact, let's just take a quick look at a chart here on it. So I'm not quite sure that I want to continue to battle that one. So this is a leap trade, a long-term option, a couple years out. And again, I had entered that somewhere, I'm thinking it was somewhere right around in here, maybe in here, and then it did rally nicely. It did break to a new high there as well. So things were looking pretty good, but then it's fallen back. Now it has fallen back to close to what I would consider the prior lows in here and where it had broken out in here. So it is pulled back into that range where if it's going to rally, this is likely where it's going to rally from. But I'm not a fan of what essentially I'm seeing here as a downtrend. Now, we made a slightly higher low here so far, but it's not real compelling. So I'm going to do a little fundamental analysis on that one this week and make a decision as to whether or not I want to continue on with this. The key to doing a leap trade, a long-term option, is once I enter that, I want to see some quick, fast movement in my favor because I am paying basically decay. I've got theta decay happening on those long leaps. Now, it's not a lot of money early on in the trade when I have lots of time left in the trade. That may only be a few cents a day or so. As the trade gets later and later in its process, of course, that theta decay accelerates. Now, if I have bought something that has taken off and is moving up significantly, I'm less concerned about that. If I bought something that maybe is not accelerating or taking off the way that I had wanted it to after a few weeks' time, I got to take another serious look and try to determine, is this something I want to hang on to or not? So that is a decision I'm going to get into later this week as well. And then the final thing might be, what sort of trade might I consider looking at to enter at this stage of the game? So let's come back to SPX again and take a quick look there. A fairly common trade to potentially enter when we're back at the highs, which we are, again, hitting that zone right there. If there's a trade that works well in that environment, an environment where we're still bullish, we're still moving in a solid uptrend, but we might expect a little bit of a pullback here for a few days. Many times that's a flat fly trade. That's rather than doing a broken wing butterfly, it would be a flat butterfly. And the benefit to a flat butterfly is it has negative delta. If we do get that little bit of pullback, that trade will gain in value. Again, those of you in the alert service, particularly if you've taken the deep dive butterfly course, I'll put a link to that down below. You're going to know all about that. You're going to understand how that moves, why it moves the way it moves, why that's a trade that I like to enter at this particular market highs. All that said, if I were to enter a trade this week, given the fact that I'm looking at us being essentially at highs right now, that would be a likely trade. If we do, in fact, break out here on Tuesday and start moving higher, that plan is going to be off for me because all of a sudden we are now potentially vaulting up into a new zone. We've been trading in this sideways channel here for a period of time. And what usually happens is when you break out of that, you essentially go into a new sideways channel. So I'm going to want to wait and see where that channel stalls out before I were to decide, is a flat fly the right thing? If we get volatility and a pullback and some spike in volatility, I'm going to look at a broken wing butterfly, a 60-50, a 60-40, something along those lines. Again, those of you that have taken the class, you're going to understand all about that. If you have not, I do get into this a little bit in the alert service, but the class is about 10 hours on this sort of content, and it's just tough to do in a shorter time frame. You really need to get the solid understanding of what trade to put on when, and then, of course, how to manage it, which is what that's all about. That wraps up the weekend update here. Again, a day late. It's Monday the 17th, but it is a closed market day today. So thanks so much, everyone. And those of you that are part of the alert service, we'll see you in the channel there this week. Take care.